All right. Well, welcome to the Meet the Experts series. This is so exciting.
So exciting. I'm so glad to be
Yeah.
here.
I'm Cassandra Hesseltine, the Film Commissioner for Humboldt-Del counties, and I would like you to please introduce yourself, Heather.
I'm Heather Frank, and I'm an executive producer, all kinds of titles. I do all kinds of things.
That is awesome. And you currently live where?
I currently live potentially, we don't really know how long I will be here, but I just moved from Los Angeles to Trinidad, California, which is a adorable little fishing coastal village on the north coast of California. A lot of people know about it and love it, or they don't know about it and they don't know what they're missing.
That's true. So yeah, you live here in Humboldt
I
County,
do.
which
I
is
can't believe it.
awesome. Yeah, it's awesome. And your adorable father reached out to me and told me that you were here, which is amazing. Great dad.
Adorable.
And yep, let me know that you and your man, who happens to work in film as well,
Yep.
are here. And so that's pretty exciting to have professionals that live in our community. We have a handful of them, and you were part of the first call where we all had a meeting and where this whole series actually kind of came out of was a call of, oh my gosh, look at all the experts we have living in our community. Wouldn't this be neat to share some of this with our locals? So
yeah, I felt there was a lot of synergy, and we all do a lot of different aspects of production. So it's such a wide range of skill sets. So it was like really cool. It almost felt meant to be.
it really did. Yeah, it was really exciting. And I just, yeah, I'm thrilled. So thank you for being part of this
Yeah, of
and
course.
helping create it. So tell us more about your profession. You know, what does it mean to be a producer, an executive producer? What are the types of things you do?
Well, it's a very good question. I mean, I think a lot of people have different impressions of what producers are. I think a lot of people think that maybe producers just manage budgets or they fund projects. That is definitely something producers do, and there are some producers who only do that. That's like their specialty, and that's what they're billed for. But where I come from, I started in broadcast television, and I kind of wear a lot of hats. I do everything from casting talent to directing talent on set to, designing sets and working with set designers to coming up with the whole creative direction of a shoot, to doing budgets, to managing crews internally and externally, crews in the field, crews on the studio. And I mean, pretty much everything. I feel like I just did a project where I did augmented reality with artists from around the world. And, you kind of get thrown into these different types of productions that, flex a million different like aspects of you. So there's a lot of things that I do. Being a producer is just such a wide range of things. A lot of it is, I would say, creative direction is a lot of what I do. But then there's the nuts and bolts side of it where you do the budgets and you organize and you plan. So it's both. It's kind of like a right and left brain thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, definitely. And it's an overseer of the entire project.
Yep.
It's exciting.
And a
Yes.
shepherd, I like to call it. It's like a shepherd because you shepherd it from the beginning to the end. And
Right.
one thing I will mention too is, I start with development. Like I do a lot of development of content, whether it's a show or just a one-off, and I shepherd it through to post-production. So I do every aspect and every part of the process that I'm part of. So it's not just I have one little like tiny job. It's like everything from the beginning to the end, soup to nuts.
Right, right. And you're making sure it gets done. The entire project is completed when you're done.
Yep.
So what type of projects, have you done? I know that you have a wide range of different types of projects. Some people just do TV, some people just do film, but you are kind of like, you have all kinds of projects that you've done.
Yeah, well, I started in broadcast television. So I did like live television, like an hour-long variety show, or I did a late night comedy show that was kind of long form. Some of them were live, some of them were live to tape. And then like the whole .com thing happened, and it created this online television, and it was like IPTV. That's what it was called back in the day. And I kind of thought that was interesting. And so I had some friends who started a company. It was one of the first IPTV stations. And so I started to launch shows, like sort of weekly shows on smaller budgets. broadcast television was like bigger budgets, big sets. I liked the idea of being able to create everything myself, down to like designing sets and everything. And so I kind of veered in there, and then I veered back into big productions. I've done lots of interviews with, all kinds of people, like Mark Hamill to like Jake Gyllenhaal, but then to like musicians. Like my first interview was with Sonic Youth at like Guitar Center in Los Angeles. It was like my first field production that I ever did. I was so nervous, but I really did. I started at stage production, big stages, on camera talent. And then I really veered into field, and I realized how different those two productions were. And I was so grateful that I didn't stick to one, like I didn't just do reality shows. I went from stage to field, back to stage. I've done some short films. I've done some music videos. I love the variety. I love the challenge and the problem solving of the different types of productions. I like to kind of be thrown into a little bit of an unknown and really work my way through it and figure it out. I love that. I'm not afraid to just be thrown into the fire.
Right. Yeah, and that's awesome. And so what would you say is the biggest difference between going into the field and having like a live interview, like this, where you may have some ideas of what's going to be said, but not entirely, versus doing something on a stage? Is there, what's the main difference and what are the similarities?
Well, I'd say the main difference is audio, because you have such a self-contained, soundproof studio that you're working in. You don't have to worry about like a helicopter going by. The field thing is just you have to start and stop because of noise, depending on where you are. Standing a lot, I will say, that really was a huge thing for me, is because you're really kind of run and gun. Like I ended up a lot of the field stuff was run and gun, meaning a little more shoestring budget and crew. And I'm used to, I was started out being used to these big crews where I have like 30 people getting this show done every day, to like a 4-man /woman crew. So I would say, yeah, so the size of the crew, the kind of technical aspects of it, and then, yeah, like the unknowns. I think you're improvising a little bit more, as opposed to using a teleprompter. You're not often using a teleprompter in the field, or at least I wasn't. You can, but you're kind of, yeah, you're a little bit more like have to be on your toes. A little less is structure, I would say, is a fundamental difference.
Mm-hmm. So what's similar?
I would say, well, I mean, you use the skills, you're still using the skills that you've learned to do both. Mm-hmm. I would say, I mean, you're still coming up with a quality product, but I would say that, I mean, similarities, you're coming up with a good product. I mean, that's really, you can shoot it as beautifully as you do in the studio. I think you've got a different backdrop.
Right. So it's not like the difference between, if you're an eye doctor, you're not all of a sudden go be an OBGYN.
No.
It's not, but where a producer could cross fields. That's what's interesting. Yeah. Or types of production. It's interesting where, doctors are so specific to a certain type of, being a doctor, where producers, they can go around and do different ones, Yeah,
I mean, being an independent contractor, you get hired for stuff that, being a producer is such a general term, because every job I've ever had has a slight learning curve, because there's something about it. It's either technical or creative, or the talent is challenging in some way. And it's never the same. It's a different beast every time. Like, for example, the last project I did was for Snap, and we worked with AR sunglasses, so augmented reality, and we shot video and still imagery, kind of like GIFs, with artists from around the world. I mean, I use a film camera, I'm used to using film cameras, but like I had to really put myself behind this technology and understand how the technology worked, and it was quite a learning curve. Super exciting and interesting. Mm-hmm. Same with this Uber project I did. We shot in like 12 countries, 10 languages, made, 1,400 videos that were in all these different languages. And I've never done that many videos at once with that many different languages. So you have all the localization, production, and so then you kind of have to like get up to speed on that stuff. So it's really different every time. It makes it
Wow.
exciting.
You know, what's interesting is every interview so far that we've done, everybody's talked about how every project's been different, regardless if they're special effects, visual effects, you know, as a
Mm-hmm.
producer. And everybody loves that. That's one thing that they all have said that they love
Yeah.
is that no project is ever the same. And, you know, I've worked in film for 20 years, and whether I was a producer when I was a producer, or now as the film commissioner, I would say the same exact thing. Like, yes, my job for 10 years has been to help productions like you, but not one of them has been the same. And there's a learning curve every time of what they
Yeah.
need from us, how they need it, what, you know, it's specific to that particular project. And it's what makes the job exciting instead
I
of,
agree.
you know, instead of it being like, oh, I do the same thing every single day.
I
I
guess.
think us
Yeah.
kind of people don't have that personality,
No.
to, you know, we need the stimulus to thrive. And
Yeah.
so yeah, it says something about, I think it's really interesting to hear the same kind of passion about that from each of the people I've been interviewing, and it makes me realize we are all the same. We're all
You have
those
to have
people.
a certain energy for sure. You have to be a
Yeah.
collaborator. You have to want to work
Yes.
with a group, with people. I know a lot of people who are very talented, but like to kind of work solo. They're writers and they really just want to put their head down and be alone and create something themselves. And I totally respect that. But I think on the other side of the coin, you know, you go into these productions and there's so many unknowns. And if you are not a kind of person that can be flexible and roll with the punches, it can be a tricky job. You know, you have to be on your toes and problem solve on the fly, because I guarantee no matter what production you have, no matter how organized you are, no matter how good you are at pre-production and you know, tying all the loose ends, something will happen on set that will be unexpected. Something will break, a piece of equipment will break. You will have weird weather changes. Something will happen that will throw a wrench into your original plan, and you have to pivot. You just have
Yeah.
to, and it happens all the time. And you can't anticipate what's going to happen. And I think being a producer, you tend to anticipate the worst. You go, well, what's the worst that could happen? And you have to, because you have to kind of mentally prepare yourself for those things. And I like that unknown. It does give me anxiety too. I think it's like a little bit of both, but
Right.
it is exciting. I agree.
And I think, you know, the interesting thing I was just thinking while you were talking about that, you know, again, so that was the similarity between the other people that I've been interviewing. But one of the differences between the other people and you is your job, like we talked about a few minutes ago, really oversees the whole project, right? And the other departments that I've been talking to, they are a collaboration. They're a part of a cog in the wheel, you know, and they
Yeah.
collaborate with the whole project and have to help make the whole thing happen. But they ultimately are just responsible about their part. You know, if something breaks in their department, where you have to make sure that, you know, whatever breaks in any department, you're part of helping with the solution. And
Yep.
that, you know, yes, that can make many sleepless nights and lots of
Yeah.
anxiety. You know.
I love it. I always loved working when I was full time and I was like an EP of like a studio. I loved that because I worked with IT, I worked with marketing, I worked with sales dev, I helped bring business in, I worked with finance. I had to
Right.
sit down with the CFO to go through line items and explain why we were spending a certain amount of money, you know? So I
Right.
always love that collaboration with all the teams, you know? I thrive with that.
That's exciting. Yeah, it sounds like it. You definitely sound passionate. So one of our questions is supposed to ask you is, what do you love about your job? But I think that that was it. Is there anything else that you love about your job that
Yeah.
you want to share with us?
I think the right and the left brain thing is big for me, because I studied science and art and I was always battling between the two, like which direction do I go? And I like that film is kind of both things, and it's highly creative, which I love being in a creative field, and the collaborativeness of it. I love collaborating. I'm a natural collaborator. I've been so lucky to work with amazing people in my career, and a lot of them are my good friends. And it's just such a fun industry to be in. If you're a social person, and you don't have to be a social person. There's a lot of, you know, roles on a set that aren't that social. But for me, I just love the collaborative nature of it and the creativity.
How did you get into this industry? How did, that's always been a really interesting question too for me, is how everybody has either
Definitely.
fallen into it, or did you always have the passion to want to work in film? How did it happen for you?
It's a good question. You'll never guess. I've always been an artistic person, but I was a science major for a couple years in college, which is what brought me to Humboldt, because of Humboldt State University is a good science school. But I was always really torn because I studied French from a young age, and I kept taking French even though I didn't have to, because I loved it. And one of the things I loved about studying French was film. And I always loved photography and film, and I got really into like the French New Wave. And so I started to take a lot of French film classes. I did a study abroad program in Paris, and I took like a David Lynch theory class, like it was taught in French. It was a trip. And just like really, I love the heady film stuff, film theory. And I just got really into it. And I took some film classes, and I ended up getting a degree in French, but a lot of that kind of greased the wheels for me to get into film, because that's what I loved so much about it. And so I was living in San Francisco at the time, and I met someone who worked at a TV station called Tech TV. I got a job there as a PA, and I worked for their flagship show. And I just figured, film in San Francisco wasn't quite as prominent as it is in LA. So I kind of was like, oh, television, that would be cool. And so I sort of just fell into it. And I knew I wanted to do something creative and technical. And so really the French studies and film studies in French really like pushed me into doing it as a career. Mm. And I did do a couple short films with some friends at Humboldt State. I have no idea where those tapes are. They're probably on VHS or Digibeta somewhere.
I have mine on VHS still from Humboldt State.
Yeah, I know. I have one too that I did. I did a 16mm film that was silent. I acted in it. I was the only actor. It was black and white. I edited it on a flatbed. I did everything. I directed it, edited it, acted in it. And I'm dying to see it again. I haven't seen it for like 20 years, and it's on VHS. So I have to find it.
John Heckel? Was your professor John Heckel?
Yes.
I had a feeling.
This 16mm class, though, I took at Berkeley. This was like when I was in San Francisco. But what a fun, and I will bring this back up later, because I have some ideas for you out there for people who are interested in going into the industry.
Oh, perfect. Yes. And that's exactly what we want to know. And that is literally the next question as I look down. What recommendations do you have for anyone wanting to pursue this path? Like what training or aptitude, or even just what could they do around the house type thing? If someone is interested in pursuing a path and producing, what is your suggestion that they do?
For me, I used to manage people, and people would ask me that, like the younger people who were trying to figure out which, they were editing, but they were also doing stuff on camera. They were also running stuff in the studio, and they couldn't figure out they were trying to figure out which avenue they wanted to go in production, because production is very vast. You can be an audio operator, you can be a director, you can be a producer, you can be an on-camera person, like an on-camera expert about something. You can be some kind of like, grip hand, like a production hand. You're doing more electrical. I mean, it goes on and on. You can do wardrobe. And so for me, when I figured out I wanted to be a producer, director type in television specifically, I realized I couldn't sit in a dark room and edit. My boyfriend is an editor, and he's really good at it, and he's got the personality for it. And I think editing is a wonderful avenue. You can make good money. It's super creative. But for me, I'm a little more of a on-set kind of person than someone who's sitting in a dark room. So there is a wide range of production-related jobs that would pretty much fit every personality. So I would suggest, being a production assistant or something on a set, and really seeing all the different roles and what they do. Also taking a film class, like that 16mm class I took at the beginning of my career. Because I did on camera, I directed it, I came up with the concept, I edited it. I was able to kind of see like, oh, like I resonated with certain parts of the production, but others I was like, I don't know if I want to edit. It's just not really my thing. Totally respect it. But it made me really hone what it is that I want to do. And you can still do multiple things. Like I took a lot of acting classes in LA. I've been on camera for some short films. I do a podcast. Like I like to do stuff on camera here and there, but I prefer to be behind the camera. But it's great to dabble. I mean, I recommend, making your own stuff, dabbling in all the different roles to just see what feels good, what resonates with you.
Yeah, that makes sense. And taking a class where you can experiment with
Yep.
that and play with that. Yeah,
Mhm.
that makes a lot of sense for sure.
Oh, the
And
master. Oh, sorry about
yeah,
that. The master classes, masterclass.com are great too. They had a really good deal to like do a monthly membership, and you can take all kinds of kind of film related classes from the masters and really learn the nuances of these different roles.
yeah, that's a great idea too. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about your podcasts? Because we haven't really touched on those, and I know that that's a big part of your life.
Yeah, I mean, podcasting has gotten really big, obviously, and it wasn't that big that long ago. And I have a colleague of mine who I've worked with for my entire career, and we've moved to LA twice, moved back to San Francisco twice. We constantly are working for the same companies, and she's a podcaster. She's like a journalist, and so she's got a couple podcasts. And we always have a million things to talk about. And so one day we just kind of came up with this concept. We're always brainstorming concepts for shows and things, and we've done so many shows together that we thought, why don't we do a podcast? And so I learned how to, and podcast production is different than film and television and digital media production, but you still use a lot of the same tools. But I wanted so badly to like learn, like launch my own podcast. I always, there was a mystery around it, and I was like, how do you do that? What kind of gear do you need? What kind of setup, like our audio, video podcast, what platforms? So I really got into the geeked out on sort of how do I do this? I want to be the person who launches her own podcast. And so I just learned, I just taught myself I figured it out, took bits and pieces from around online and from people I knew who did them. And I launched a show, and it was a learning curve, but it was super fun. And we created a community on Patreon. Patreon's a platform it's one of many platforms you can use, but what's great about it is you can go ad free, so it's all community driven. So yeah, we're on this platform, and we've been doing it for a year and a half. We're relaunching. We took a bit of a break, but we're relaunching this month on episode 60 we're at. So yeah,
That's a lot.
yeah, it is.
Yeah, well, that's cool. And again, I'm hearing you say, for someone out there who might be interested in this, that you researched it, you went online, you looked, you tried it out, you played with it, and a lot of it, people think sometimes, well, I don't know anybody in Hollywood, or I don't know, I don't have a degree in that. And sometimes, or a lot of these stories I keep hearing from everybody is, well, I took a class, or I started dabbling in it, or I got one foot in the door and just worked really hard. So it's interesting. Seems to be, again, the same kind of self-starter skills, set, of, exploring until you find,
there's
what
lots
you
of
like.
tools. There are a lot
Yeah.
of tools at our fingertips now. You can do anything really if you put your mind to it, and there's everything you could possibly imagine online. I'm here as a consultant also. I do this for a living, so anything that you want to do, you can do, and there's info out there.
So, what are some epic stories you might have of like successful moments that you had in filming, or just was really fun or exciting moments?
Sure.
And to contradict that, do you have any epic fails? Because sometimes our fails actually end up being, huge successes down the road for us. They teach us a lot,
Absolutely.
So do you
Yeah.
have any stories that you come to mind during filming?
Yeah, I mean, I think some things that stand out for me, I love again, like that being thrown into the fire, and there's been like a nervousness about something that I haven't done before. Like I was hired to produce and interview on camera at South by Southwest one year for Complex Magazine, and to interview musicians. And I was I've always been really into music, and I've done some production in music, some music videos and some music shows. So I was so excited, and I was interviewing musicians that I really admired. And that was so fun for me and so exciting, but also kind of new territory, because you are in a very loud outdoor space and you have to control your production. And I was the point person of like directing the crew, but I also had to have makeup on and be on camera and present and interface with the talent and really be professional. And it was a lot. I mean, it was wearing a lot of hats, and I felt very proud of that. I did a couple years work with the Walking Dead IP, the guy who created the comic book. And at the time I had read the comic book way before that, and I was a huge fan. And so for me, when that gig came along, I was so excited because I was like already a fan. And a lot of it was putting creativity into video around helping market the comic book and the show and the Comic-Con stuff and everything. And we were given an X amount of budget to create video content for them. And I got to come up with it. With a tiny, tiny team, essentially one other person bouncing ideas off of, we got to come up with a content plan that spanned a year, from one Comic-Con to the other Comic-Con,
wow.
San Diego to New York. And we ended up doing a 25-minute documentary on the IP, and we screened it at the San Diego Comic-Con, film festival. And it was just really fun. It was a really fun long-term project that took a lot of thought into the future, and a lot of planning. And I enjoyed that immensely. I interviewed Beastie Boys once. I always forget that I did this. It was so long ago.
Fun.
We were at Sundance on the snowy mountain. It was snowing, and they were in a yurt. And I remember being in this yurt with a bunch of people and like passing around this microphone and being like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. This is so exciting. But it was wild because it was like snowstorm outside and this whole thing. And then, yeah, I would say like one of probably the production that I look back on as the most learning, like intense thing. I mean, a lot of them are intense, and a lot of them hurt your feet, and like you're tired at the end of the day, long hours. But I did a 3-week trip to Japan spanning 3 cities, Osaka, Kyoto, and Tokyo. And we were doing cultural pieces in the city for PlayStation. And, we were eating our way through Osaka and shooting with talent and doing all this fun stuff. And it was one of the most challenging things I've ever done, partially because when I first landed there, I was only with a camera guy. I was with my DP, and neither of us spoke Japanese. All we knew was, konnichiwa and arigato gozaimasu, and like that's it. And we, none of the street signs are in English. We had not had a translator. We were going to get a translator, but not until a few days in. And so we had to shoot tons of B-roll for the first few days. And I had to, I was a producer, so I had to like get us around and manage. I mean, these are big cities on foot, or getting in taxis or whatever. And man, I think I would have really learned a little more Japanese going there, because it was tough getting around and figuring out how to get to like these, areas of interest and not being able to read anything. That took a lot of physical strength, that trip, it was early in the morning till late at night, pounding the pavement in these 3 huge, daunting, cities. But I would say that, and it was hard. It was hard, and but also wonderful. And I would say it's the experience that I look back on the most, even though it was probably the hardest. When I pull from my strength in production is like, I had a colleague at the time that used to say, he's like, these trips are really hard. When you feel like you're losing energy, tell everybody to climb the wall, just keep going, and I had to do that, but it was so worth it.
Yeah, I feel you on that. You definitely learn from those moments, but you were still successful in spite of it. But yeah, that's amazing.
You have to go through those challenges. It has to be hard for it to be worth it, I think, in a lot of ways.
Right. That makes sense. So how do you see, the film industry here in the Redwood region, especially during the pandemic now. We have productions wanting to stay closer to home, to Hollywood, ones that were slated to film elsewhere, East Coast, wherever, who are now reaching out to us saying, hey, we want to stay in California.
Yeah.
So how are you seeing things now, now that you're up here, with us at least for a while, how do you feel about the filming here in
I mean,
Redwood?
I personally feel like I'm hearing there's a lot of filming going on in Utah and kind of like random places right now. And I think possibly because, I almost think this is more of an opportunity for us right now because LA is so dense. It's hard to find a place to shoot that doesn't have a lot of people with masks. You got to do, I think you have to take a lot more precaution shooting in a place like Los Angeles. I think here it's a great opportunity to shoot because you have open air. There's not a lot of people. It's unprecedented beauty. That's one thing that I think I wish I could proselytize a little bit more because it's not like anywhere else. It is the Pacific Northwest. If you haven't been up here, it is the natural beauty is hard to beat. And I think it's because it's not so touched by humans. But I also think it seems like a safer place to me to shoot a film because you have a lot of the open air. You don't have to deal with a lot of crowds and density. You have more space and air to breathe and more than 6 feet between people. And so I think it could be a really good time to bring more productions up here. That's sort of first and foremost. And I think, yeah.
Well, and the thing too, as we talk about this, and when the community watches your interview, a side note is we want them to all know that obviously there's a full procedure. There's also now what you call a compliance officer that has to be hired, which is in our case here, a registered nurse who helps create a safe plan, the safest way that you could do filming if you're going to film during a pandemic. I think sets look right now more like a NASA science experiment than a creative, beautiful art film. It's more of a, it's been interesting because I'm working with our head person who's creating our compliance plan and with each production as they've been requesting to come film. And they have talked about being a little easier here because we are the size, Humboldt County on its own is the size of Rhode Island, small state, and yet we only have 120,000 people. And if you are filming more out in our epic redwoods or on private land or places like that, more than likely you're not around the average, population. And so then it just becomes more of how do you treat the set, which it's amazing all the protocols they've come up with and working in pods and departments not crossing into each other and daily temperature taking and testing often and all of those things. It's an interesting undertaking, and I'm really excited to see how this works out. Fingers crossed that, people are safe on set, and that we are able to still continue to make content. And I think, like you said, it is an interesting time for the Redwood region. It definitely could be something that helps us increase our filming here. I'd hate to benefit from the pandemic by any means, but
sure, of course.
It is a positive in some ways that more production might be coming to our area.
I think so too. And getting out of the fray, I'm sure some filmmakers want to go out into have some peace and quiet, and you don't have a lot of ambient noise, so when you're shooting outside, you're not going to have as much trouble with helicopters. Like in LA, there's just, choppers everywhere. You're going to have a lot more, peace out here. And, there's a lot of interesting structures like buildings that are not too far out, that are big, potential for like sound stages and, shooting indoors. But again, with like the land around you, the space. So I think, I personally would feel more comfortable like shooting up here. I think it's like the perfect place post-pandemic to bring a production.
Awesome, thank you. And so, if a production is here, right, what does our local crew and local vendors need to know, like especially working with like a producer or productions, that are here, What's the kind of things that they need to know in order to be, film friendly?
I would say that, well, first I would say, like, are you saying, so like if a vendor or like a business wants to create a documentary about their business or something?
Well, no, I'm saying, like, let's say you bring a production here. What does a local vendor here need to know,
I
like,
see.
to help you out, to be a good company that helps you out with, like, you're
Yeah,
renting, vans from them. What do they need to know to be film friendly to work with you? Because it's a different industry, right? It's
sure.
not like a tourist who comes and just rents a van from a van company. The tourist has to work within the hours of that company, right? And they have
Sure.
to go, yeah, exactly. See,
Yeah,
and so, we have vendors here that help out productions,
sure.
movies, TV shows, whatever, when they come. We have local crew, people who maybe have their normal day job, but when a production comes into town, they might be able to take off some time and go work on a production. But, so for instance, when Swiss Army Man came here, the producer said to me, give me a list of all your people that are your, main, production assistants and who have experience. And so we give him a list, and then he says, oh, I'm going to want a backup list. And I said,
Mm.
why? And he said, well, because more than likely we fire about half of them and we have to start
Wow.
over when we go to a small town, because he's like, they're not qualified. They don't know how
Sure.
to be, a production assistant.
Yeah.
They didn't fire one.
Mm,
And he said this is the best crew he had ever worked
amazing.
with that was in a small town that hadn't been, it wasn't like San Francisco, or wasn't Utah, or wasn't Atlanta, Georgia, where they hadn't been, and a lot of it is we try to work really hard to train our local crew
Mhm.
and our local vendors, our shops, our businesses that work with production, that even though we don't have the kind of filming in Atlanta, Georgia, the amount,
Mhm.
we have enough that when they do come, we really try to train them to be film friendly, to be able to help out a production in the different weird ways productions need that are
Yeah.
maybe outside their norm of what they would normally do. And so I'm just wondering, what kind of things do you need when you go to a small town? Do you need
Mhm.
a local crew to be like, or what do you need, like, a local business to be?
Tacos, taco truck of some kind.
But what kind of, aptitude, what kind of behaviors do you need from them?
I mean, I would say like flexibility, because I think, I'm working on a gig right now, prepping a gig that we're still getting sign off on. And, the amount of patience and flexibility you need, like we may or may not have to rent gear at the last minute somewhere in California. We don't even know where yet. You have to have this kind of like, you have to jump when the fire's hot, but what's the expression? But like you really have to like be able to problem solve really quickly, and maybe at 3 in the morning, or maybe at 6 in the morning, or and you know you'll probably end up with a request that you've never gotten before. But I think that this community is I know enough about this community that it's very, people are very kind here. And I feel like since it's a small community, you tend to help your neighbor more. You're a little bit more collaborative, to bring that word back. I think that word being collaborative is key, because and flexible. You don't know when the request is going to come. You're not even sure maybe if you can fulfill the request, but there's always going to be a place for you to find what you're looking for, and just
Mhm.
be resourceful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, that's similar to what some of our other people who we've been interviewing have said, and that's really great feedback, I think, because I think whether you're starting in at the bottom and you're a
Mhm.
production assistant and you've never worked on something, or if you're at the top and you're an executive producer, I think that it's the same skill set of being flexible, being
Yeah.
open, knowing that it's going to be something completely different and random, and it could come at 3 in the morning,
Yep.
and that's film.
Yeah. No, it really is.
Solving problems. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
That's,
I can't even emphasize enough how, even if you're like the best producer in the world and you're the most organized and you think of every possibility that something's going to go sideways, something new will happen on set and you will not be prepared for it. So I think honing your like problem solving skills and improvising has been huge for me in my career. Huge. Learning how to improvise, taking an improv class actually is super helpful. I took a groundlings class in LA, and
Oh, wow.
I'm not that good at it. I'm not that good at the actual acting improv, but I'm good at improving problem solving kind of thing. But I highly recommend that. It's good for anybody in their confidence in solving problems and making stuff happen.
That's an excellent idea.
The local
And
vendors take improv classes.
right? That's awesome. So what are your final thoughts on being a producer, on, you know, your career, on, you know, the future of filming? What are your final thoughts for us?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited. I think I'm sort of taking a little bit of a sabbatical in terms of I'm doing other things. You know, I think I've been working pretty hard for the last however many years in production, and I'm still doing my podcast and I'm still doing gigs. But I would say that I would love to create a little interesting production hub up here where I'm working on some films, I'm doing some podcasts, I'm helping other people launch podcasts, and you know, sort of make this a little more of a production town. I don't see why not.
I like
I know, and you know, like
that.
helping local businesses and make some beautiful video showing their product and getting you know, websites looking prettier and making everything like, you know, I really think that this place has a lot of potential. And there's direct flights to LA, which, you know, my plan is to go back and forth. So we'll see what happens.
Yay. Well, we are so stoked to have you in our community, you and
Thank
Elijah. I can't believe that
you.
you guys are here. Thank you to Papa Frank for
Yeah.
telling us that you existed and that you were in our Redwood region. And yeah, and I'm just really tickled pink to have you be part of our community, our film.
Thank you. I am too. I'm really excited. I was unexpected, you know, and I'm more thrilled that this exists here and that I can somehow be a part of it or help grow it or evangelize it somehow. And
I
my
love
dad
it.
would really enjoy watching this.
Yay. Well, thank you so much for your
Yeah,
time
thank
and
you.
for working with us on this. And,
Yep,
you know, I look forward to the future with you.
me too. Thank you so much.